Back in the 70s, after Frank Shorter won the medal and he came back to the US, it brought about a revolution of running. After Arnold Schwarzenegger became what he became, that brought strength and training to the world. In India, we have not had someone like that. Someone like Shivnath Singh in the 70s, he was blazing fast. He was 212 marathoner.
India has a huge population. They have a history of toughness. All the way back to Gandhi, altitude training. I was looking at first to train at 13,000 feet. Kirk Pfeffer, he got up to it 200 miles a week. I'm not saying that this is equal to what you have to go through in India, but if you get some people that'll make that extra effort.
Threshold, should it be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes? For a layperson, can we please start to just explain it? Will just help.
Threshold is something you're working hard, but you're not racing.
Coach Rob, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for your patience. And I know this was a long time coming, 2 times reschedule, a small technology glitch, keeping you away from your dinner. And at the age of 112, taking a month now to recover back from this setback, but still being able to come and join. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to it. I saw one of your podcasts recently. It was Mattson on fasting.
Yes.
And I was impressed. I look forward to this after I saw, your questions and what you got from Mark. And congratulations on having a podcast that is disseminating information that I think is very valuable to people.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been 4 years of we doing this. We produce it mostly once a week, and guests have been very generous in accepting the request and coming to talk to me, and that's how I have the pleasure of speaking with you today. First, I want to say huge thank you for doing everything that you have done. Everybody knows now for last 6-7 decades of you contributing to running at large, contributing to not only building the world-class athletes, but also helping beginners, helping all of us, inspiring all of us, and through which we are able to learn a little, learn a lot, but of course feel positive about it. And from the moment you joined this conversation, I feel positive by just talking to you. I'm not intimidated. I'm not feeling, and that's the sign of a great coach to even start with, that everybody feels should be feeling inclusive, and that's how you're making everybody feel, in addition to making them the world class that they've become.
Well, thank you very much. That was a wonderful introduction. I have a question for you.
So,
all right. India has a huge population.
Yeah.
A big part of their population, they are lean, small body people. They have a history of toughness. All the way back to Gandhi.
That's right.
And probably before, of being able to survive difficult situations.
Yeah.
I know the weather over there is not conducive to distance running much of the year, heat and humidity, but you have altitude.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why. I know people have to make a living and probably don't have a whole lot of time to go into distance running, but it seems like I bet you have a lot of people that would be great distance runners. And so for your podcast, if you are motivating some people that would, because you want to find the outliers in India, you have outliers that would be, I would think would be superstars in distance running, world-class people. So I'll keep my fingers crossed and hopefully see this in the future.
Thank you. And this was actually one of the reasons for me to not only start the podcast, but before this, we started a half marathon race to promote Indian runners that can we invite, help sustain training of faster runners. And back in 2018, we started. Since you asked this question, I want to go back to 4 or 5 decades. Back in the 70s, after Frank Shorter won the medal and he came back to the US, it brought about a revolution of running at the participative level in the US. After Arnold Schwarzenegger became what he became, that brought strength and training to the world. In India, we have not had someone like that. We've had someone like Shivnath Singh in the 70s. He was blazing fast. He was 212 marathoner, then barefoot. And to date, no one has beaten his record. People have not even touched 215. A few years ago, we saw one runner, Avinash Sable, getting close to 1 hour mark in the half marathon. So he was at 1 hour a few seconds, and that's been the fastest. Runners are getting closer to 102, a lot more 103 in the half marathon. In the marathon, what happens, what I have seen at least of studying this from very close quarters, is the runners are pretty good at shorter distances, mid distances, as they start to grow older. And they have, in one way, they have a stress to start taking up another job, a full-time job. The moment they have a full-time job, their motivation to keep training for a marathon reduces. Because I keep thinking that if we can have 50, 100, 102, 103, 104 marathoners, why can't we have a 210, 212, 215 kind of marathoners? From half marathon, they should graduate to running faster, but we continue to see 216, 218. That's the kind of timing that we get here in India. So one reason I find that people get jobs, they don't have the motivation to continue training for marathon. Second, we have seen possibly they don't have as fast pacers to train with them at faster paces when they are training. And I've been to a bunch of training academies. And third could be, I'm not sure, I don't have data, but it seems like the science is still not there in greater detail for these elite athletes. Nutrition, I think some of them are getting overtrained, and this could be another reason. We are trying to do what we can to help people, and so I create content in Hindi as well, break down these training methodologies for them, etc. We support through sports nutrition, etc. But we see it's getting closer to where it should be, but still very, very far, if you really ask me.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads into what we did in 2000.
Right.
1990s, we didn't have any international level distance runners hardly at all. Bob Kennedy and one other, and that was about it. So I was getting ready to retire from UCLA in 2000, and I had a training group down in San Diego before I came up to take the job at UCLA in 79. And that group won the national cross country championship. And it was guys from just the Brooklyn Community College, 2-year college in San Diego that I had that just came from 8 high schools. And they dominated the race, the national championships, over the programs that were sponsored, had the money, had, well, you would think all the necessities to be the best. We went to the starting line in one car with one of our guys in the trunk, and we won the race. It's in the documentary, City Slickers Can't Stay With Me. I'll tell you about that one later, but, and then that spawned a book, Running to the Edge. So in 2000, we knew we could do better than what our people were doing in 2000, or, in the 1990s. 2000 Olympic Games, I'm in Sydney, got Meb with us, but he got sick right at the end. Otherwise, I think he would have gotten top 3 in the 10K. But in the marathon, for instance, we only had one qualifier in the women, one in the men, and they didn't get close to a medal. And the same in all the distances. I don't think we got close to a medal. So we felt, we wanted to do something. So I retired from UCLA a little bit early, and purposely, while I still had the energy, I wanted to put together a training group again, similar to what we had in San Diego, the Mule Toads. And I invited Joe Vigil. He had coached for a long time at Adams State. He was retired for a few years, and invited him to come to San Diego with us, because I get him into the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, San Diego area, and top athletes that he was advising some athletes in Colorado. I said, get out of the winter, come down to San Diego. because I wanted some training people for Meb because he had just graduated from UCLA. And so we set it up that way. And then I said, let's go to, I said to be competitive, and Joe knew this too. He lived his whole life at in Colorado at altitude, 7,500 feet at Alamosa. And so he kind of took it for granted. And he loved physiology and taught it at Upstate. And he studied even in the morning. It excited him, you know, to be scientific and try to figure out ways to do this better, what we're asking athletes to do. So he was a perfect person to join us. Very knowledgeable altitude. We'd done some training, but not a lot. When I was getting ready to retire from UCLA, knowing I was going to put together a group, I spent time with the physiologists, especially Ben Levine and Robert Chaplin, about altitude training. And they had experimented with high-low in Park City and down in Salt Lake City. So we realized that the best altitude was about 8,000 feet. Well, that's the same as Mammoth Lakes in the Sierras in California, about 300 miles from LA and about 400 miles from San Diego. So I thought this would be ideal. And there's a lot of level ground up there. I was looking at first to train at 13,000 feet. There is an area with 13,000 feet. There's a place you can live at 10,000 feet. So I thought, oh, this is ideal. But that was 99 when I'm, you know, researching everything. And then they said the recent evidence is it's better to be at 7,000 and 8,000 feet. You gain some things above 8, but you lose some things too. It's better to be 7 to 8. So Mammoth was ideal. So I proposed that to Joe too. And then we set about doing this thing. But the motivation was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, our guys were running faster than our guys in the 90s. How could that be? How could that be? We knew we could do better. Our guys were running in the 90s 2:15. We did 2:15 as a training run. Honestly, Kirk Pfeffer at Grossmont Community College, 2-year college, 18 years old. This is 1970s. He ran 2:18. 2:17 as an 18-year-old. It was a world junior record for a long, long time. Then he ran 2:10 a couple of years later. Another one, Ed Mendoza, ran 2:10. This is back in the, 60s and 70s. So, and then we had no one in the United States who could do that. We had at UCLA guys running 2:13. They weren't marathoners. We had a 1,500 meter runner. He was a 357 miler in his junior year at UCLA as a training run during the winter in 2:13. Okay, so we knew we could do this thing, and all we had to do is get back to where we were and do the same training. We'd have some distance runners again that would be internationally competitive. And what we felt, if we shared that with everybody, it wasn't just about our club, Mammoth Training Group. It was, let's give them good distance runners that are visible, that'll raise the bar, and then the group beyond them that'll be coming in, hopefully, will be even better. And they will be stars, hopefully, internationally. Well, started in 99, end of 99, 2000, after Sydney. 4 years later,
2004.
I was very fortunate. I was a distance coach, but 2 of the athletes on our training group from Mammoth, Deena Kastor got the marathon bronze. Meb Keflezighi, who I'd coached since from UCLA when he was a freshman in 94. So both of them and he got the silver and probably should have gotten the gold. He was inexperienced and made one mistake with 2 miles to go, let Paul Deena go. But the point is that, and we were the only country to get 2 medals in the marathon. So it made us look like we knew what we were doing. And it inspired people to say, where's Mammoth? How do we train at altitude? So that was what spurred it. Until that point, I was getting feedback from coaches. You don't need to train at altitude. That's not going to help you unless you race at altitude. A lot of coaches said that.
Right.
In the United States, we had a lot of other negative comments. Oh, you're going to get, doctors were saying, oh, you're going to get sick if you go to the mountains during the winter. You know, it's going to be too cold. Told Meb that, you know. So you had to overcome all these things and inertia. And even Meb said, do we have to be up here? I said, because he had gotten the 10,000 meter American record in, what was it, 2001, I think. He got the American record, 10,000. He ran, what was it, 27:13, and the old record was 27:20. Is lasted for a long time. So you're talking about having to do some things that are very difficult, to work 2 jobs, to have heat and humidity, et cetera. My argument or my suggestion to Meb was this: if we had guaranteed you would get the American record in 10,000 meters and you would make the Olympic team, you would have been willing to live in a cave at altitude. You would have done that. Yes. I said, we're not living in caves, we're living in condos. It's not that bad. But you know, both he and Deena and others had to leave their families. They had to leave their friends and isolate themselves. It's a resort at Mammoth, but it's not conducive to young people finding other young people. And, you know, there are sacrifices, and running in the winter through the snow, and it gets a lot of snow and very cold up there. So I'm not saying that this is equal to what you have to go through in India, but if you get some people that will make that extra effort. Kirk Pfeffer, when they won the national cross country championship, and he ran 2:10 in the marathon in Fukuoka, 2:10:05, I think, said, and it's in the documentary. Let me see if I can remember the exact sentence. It was like, we decided to become fanatical. I still look at that film and it's, you know, now he's in his 60s or something. He's saying that when in the documentary. You got to watch the documentary. City Slickers Can't Stay With Me, because these guys are being interviewed that did this stuff. Why did they do it? And they give you the motivation on why they did it. Everybody had a different reason for it. Some of them were trying to escape what was going on in their life, but whatever it was. But when I heard that, when I saw that, because I never heard that from him, but they got it on film, we decided to become fanatical. And hair goes up in the back of my head. I don't want to run against that guy. You know, there it was. Now, a lot of people could pick him out and said, he's never going to run that fast. He had long upper body and didn't have really long legs. He didn't look like a great distance runner and kind of ran a little bit awkward. We do a lot of drills and stuff to, you know, and, but, you know, he wasn't to be denied. And some of the workouts he did, you know, phenomenal. He got up to at times as many as 200 miles a week.
My goodness, 200 miles.
He was fanatical. Now, he wasn't the only guy that did that. There was a British runner, I can't remember his name, but he finally broke the 10,000 meters world record. I know him, but I can't, his name escapes me right now. Maybe think of it later. But he'd gotten up to 200 miles a week, and he would always break down, but he finally got the world record in 10,000 meters. And Kirk Pfeffer knew that, and we had other guys on the team that were experimenting with high mileage. Other guys, I wasn't encouraging that, but I let them do it. Let's find out what happens. That's fine. And then we'd have guys doing fairly short mileage because they'd had injuries. Ed Mendoza, I wouldn't let him run more than 40, 50 miles a week. one run a day when he was at Grossmont. He went on to the Olympic team in 10,000 meters, and as I said later, ran 2:10 in the marathon, 2:10:03 on a hot day in Boston.
Wow.
So these type of guys became inspired, and once they did it, a lot of guys became inspired. So we went from 0 medals, not even close, I don't think, in 2000. We got better and better and better. We got those 2 marathon medals in 2004. 2008, Meb was injured, didn't make the team. Deena, I think, would have medaled again, but broke navicular or something in her foot at 5,000 meters, so I had to drop out. That would have been one she was really ready for. But then Meb came back and 12, got 4th. He got really sick, got the wrong fluid. They handed him the wrong thing, and he was throwing up and everything. Was back in not even the 20s. He was leading the race at the beginning, came back all the way to 4th at the end. So those types of things, even though he didn't get a medal that time, cameras picked him up. They made a big deal of him. That encouraged Americans too. We can do this. He was born in Eritrea, but he came to the United States as a young kid. He took the bus to school like everybody. He wasn't one of those, guys at altitude running. The Africans have that huge advantage on us. He didn't have that. He was beaten by Americans in high school. He's very good, especially his senior year. But Americans were beating him, and Americans were beating him when he was at UCLA. He won some NCAA championships, but in his senior year, he only finished. 3 guys beat him in the 10,000 meters. And his first year after he graduated, that summer, he made a national team. And they had the Goodwill Games on Long Island in New York. He almost got lapped twice. If it had been another 20 yards, he would have been lapped twice, not once, but twice in a 10,000 meters. And here was a guy who was excited about being a professional athlete. He got a little money from Nike, and he was ready to train hard, and he was trying to lead the other Americans, and they got lapped the same thing. It's shock. Yeah. And I saw American kids go to Europe and get beat like that, and they went got a job, and you never saw them again. But with Meb, Joe and I put together the team. So I knew, and I told Meb, it's going to take a while. You're not going to. I had guys in better shape, earlier in their careers than Meb did, because Meb had some injuries, couldn't do as much volume. So I said, you stick with it, and that's why we put this group together, because we can support them. Joe and I were retired, so we could take the time, spend it, and tell them, you got to train for maybe 2 more years post-collegiately to be an international level runner. That's what we did. And then we had international runners. By the time we got to Rio, I think we had 7 medals in the distances and middle distance, men and women. We had 7 at least. So we're one of the best distance group we're in the world right now, one of the best distance countries in the world. And it's not just us. Once we did that and took them to altitude, everybody was saying, where's Mammoth? How do we do altitude? And we shared this with them. And they went to Park City, they went to Colorado and different places in northern Arizona. There was a lot of guesswork on high altitude, and that would be a separate, we trial and error, and then working with the physiologists, we figured it out. And we were a little bit ahead with a lot of this stuff, and we could talk about those issues. I don't know how long you want to do this, but each one of these issues is fun to reminisce about because that was a growing period for distance runners in the United States from 2000 on, and we'd been, out in the wild all through the 90s. So that doesn't match exactly where you are, but I hope it inspires you to think in terms of Maybe you've got the seed going. You've got some guys that are getting close to 1 hour. You've got some guys, 2:15. That's not a big leap from 2:15 to 2:10. Maybe a few tweaking the workouts, maybe getting a few more really good athletes to train together. That really helps when you haven't been at that level.
Right.
If you can do those two things.
Yeah, no, you're right. And in 2020, Avinash Sable getting to 1 hour 30 seconds for half marathon, it just seemed very exciting because it's unfair for me to compare, but I could not help but just think through that. I remember Meb's half marathon record was not very fast, 1 hour 1 minute, and his marathon is 2 hour 8 minutes 37. And so my thought was, seems like we can do faster than 2:15 for sure. It's just that when and how. And today, since it has started very interestingly, I wanted to spend some time on when 99 you set up the group together for people to come in altitude training. Now it has been very established that altitude training does help. In India, we do have training camps. Our elite training camps are at altitude and around similar altitude, actually, about 6,500 to 7,000. Now, one of the questions I have is, how did you convince back then to the athletes that they should come and invest time with you? Because as you just said, Meb also asked, will it work? How can we convince the athletes that this is right for you and this is what you should be doing?
How can you convince them? You got to win. You got to improve them. If they improve and become competitive, they'll live in the cave. They'll jump off a cliff for you. But unless you can get a couple guys like a Deena or Meb to break through, and it would have been someone else. I mean, soon after that, we got more and more people. But I think that if you can get people together, we didn't get our people together all year round. We put on almost like camps at altitude for our top people, so then they could spend time at home and run. There's a lot of them ran on their own, but then we would get back together for, let's say, a national cross-country title. And then we train really hard for that for a certain amount of time at altitude, come down, polish it up a little bit more, and then go as a group and run. And they push each other. I'm going to assume this. I have no knowledge of what type of workouts you guys are doing. But if you don't have anybody under 2:15, and these guys, if they're pretty talented, it's not science. They're not working hard. I don't think they're maybe working hard enough. And the only way you're going to get them to work at that, to become fanatical about it, to live the life, is get others that are pushing them too. And and so much easier to break through things if you got several people together. Those years at UCLA when we had those world record holders, they were working out on a track with other world record holders. They didn't break the world record when they were at UCLA, but they learned how to train at that level. And others were pushing them in other events. I coached much of my career, I coached all the jumpers and pole vaulters as well as the middle and long distance runners. So I'd compare personalities. We wanted to make jumpers stronger so they could go multiple pole vault down the runway. That takes a lot of energy over a long period of time and stuff, to use endurance for that. And then we use technique, teaching distance runners to be more efficient runners. That's a huge change. And I picked that up in Europe in the 1960s when they were ahead of us scientifically. But harking back to where, when I first started coaching, I told the guys, and they had only won one race, the team, this was high school, each year for the previous 2 years in cross country and track. And they were asking me about nutrition. They were asking me about this and that, and can we drink Coke, and can we eat pickles? And, they had all these ideas, and what kind of shoes and all that. I said, that's not your problem. That's not a problem at all. I said, you guys are not in shape. If you're in shape and you're losing by a little bit, then we'll talk about these other issues like sleep and nutrition and everything else. but I made it as basic as I possibly could. This is what you need to do. And I would run with them and get them going, get them inspired. And then they were pushing each other and I couldn't stay with them any longer. But for me, that's how all this progressed. And at each level, I don't think there was a whole lot different than that. When they went out on a road run, they were running. And they had to run to make the team or to be, well, it's obvious that that motivation and the willingness to sacrifice and to be uncomfortable and do it be consistent over a long period of time does wonders. I've always been fascinated with endurance and what a human can do. Right from the beginning, when that's where City Slickers Can't Stay With Me came from. I grew up on a log cabin in the woods on a farm in northern Minnesota. So when I came to San Diego as a teenager, a young teenager, knew nothing. High school coach took me over and said, you need to be out for track and field. I didn't even know what that was. What do you run? And he said, well, 100 and up to a mile. That was the longest race. And I was really shy. Didn't say it to him, but I said, well, City Slickers can't beat me. That's the name of the film. I didn't do the film. I didn't write it. I actually discouraged them to making the film because I didn't think it would be any good, but it turned out shown in theaters throughout the country. But that's what inspired me was, being challenged. And the fascination with, we did no really good workouts, of quality of any type. Our basic workout was like 8 times 400 meters, and we'd walk a full quarter in between. We'd walk. And no road runs. We'd only work out about 3-4 times a week, and you couldn't run on weekends. So that's how it started for me. And then it's ideal because we started at such a basic level and we were beating everybody. As I said, I won the city doing that. So to watch this thing evolve and get better and better and better and better, and we become more intelligent about training. But you add the science and all this stuff when you get to a certain level. Yeah. Not that you ignore it, but there's a basic human, you got to have that competitiveness and that background and that willingness to be grinded out before any of these esoteric advanced things will really help you that much. I'm not so sure. And people are going to blame me because I'm not blaming India, but I'm saying you have distance runners over there. And they haven't gotten that yet, I don't think, which is, I'm going to grind it out. I'm going to really be good. And I'm going to get some buddies to join me. And we're going to do this thing. And sure, if you get the right coach, but guys can do that themselves.
True. And we are starting to see some blips of it at 5,000 and 10,000 meters. Recently, earlier this year, in the Asian Championship, we had 12:59.77 in 5,000 meters, and we had 27 minutes 22 in the 10,000 meters by Gulbir Singh, who's 27 years old. So, and he made the national record in the 5,000 meter. He made the Asian record. So, seems like some of it is getting better for sure. And so here, maybe science will continue to help, and he's in the right hands with the help of absolute top quality coaches, nutritionists, and exercise scientists. But as you said, if people are slower and still not there, it possibly is that we need to even work harder, and that will take us there to first get to be as good to tap into that the top percentile to be even better.
Yeah, I'm glad you told me that. I was unaware you had those people at that level yet, but that's a lot to grow with, and to inspire other people. And yes, science certainly at that level. And what science does to a certain degree at that level is make sure guys don't overtrain, because when they have that type of success, they're liable to overtrain a little bit. So science will help us that way. So I'm glad you clarified that, and I apologize for not being aware you guys are doing that on those events. But you don't have the marathoners yet.
No, so that's why I said that at a shorter distance is getting there. But it's still not there in the marathon. In the half marathon, for example, in almost every race in my race in Pune, under 104 we have almost everybody. So like the entire elite field comes in 104, 105, but when we translate that to a marathon, for example, I don't see a lot of people doing. There are not people who can do 215, 214, and don't know. I think it was London Marathon several years ago. Once we had one of the runners who reached 215, and that's where we have been. We are 216, 218, 219. That's the time that we get. Of course, some of the races don't have as fast course, but because it also gets humid, but we don't see that our guys, even when they're traveling internationally, they're able to run any faster. So what I wanted to do is, sir, I wanted to request you to, let's assume someone is listening to this and is ready to grind, is ready to do everything that it takes, say is a 218, 220 kind of marathoner. Will there be a general playbook that the person should play with to incorporate? Of course, they need to have a coach and work with them, but how should a life or a training look like for a semi-elite to elite runner who wants to get faster?
Well, that's a very broad question, and there's a lot of ways of doing it. And Bill Lauerman, one of our greatest coaches, who passed away a few years ago, used to always say there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. And I've seen many different ways of being successful in distance running. So I think of anything, it's establishing a lifestyle, and hopefully, get that coach. If not, get a cadre of friends or people who are like-minded and are willing to make those sacrifices, like our people did. They would come up to altitude and train together. That's key. Once you've done that, you've established that, then it's the basic training is to put enough time in on an aerobic base every year. If you don't do that and you hurry it up, or you cut short and race too much, for instance. Americans were doing that in the 1990s. One of the reasons we put the group together, we didn't want people going off running on the weekend to make $100 or something to keep training. We said, no, we're going for the big races. You're going to be ready for those. And and if you're not ready, you're not going to race. And because we had a little bit of support money, or they had some support money, those are the people, we got to that level so they could be professionals. They weren't off chasing a few bucks every weekend. That's important. Now, if you're already in the 27s, what big races could you train for? Who else could you get together and establish a pattern that is consistent year after year? It took Meb 2 years after graduation to get to a level where he was international. So you've got to be willing to put in probably that amount of time. And I'm thinking that may be true for your group too, to get to that next level. Because we're talking about super shoes. So 27 high is not what 2713 was back when Meb ran it in 2000. True. That's changed. So, but basic concepts are, because you've talked to scientists, you've talked to Jack Daniels and others, but unless you get that base, I think that's what allowed us to get to the next level, whatever place of coach, high school, community college, UCLA, and up with our training group at Mammoth, was that base was established. And that the bigger you make the base, the more miles you put in, that sets up the rest of it. That sets up the growth. I talked to the Australian runners. Was it Australian or was it Lydiard? The Lydiard runners. It was with Snell, 800, 1500 meter gold medalist a couple of times. And I said, what did you do on this interval training? What did you do on this high level anaerobic type of training? And he said, it wasn't real important what we were doing on those training sessions, because we were running 100 miles a week. And we did that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then they did the hill bounds and stuff like that, all the power stuff. So he said, we knew we were going to run fast. We didn't pay too much attention to the rest of it. That's an exaggeration, maybe a little bit, but if you don't do that base, why did our guys who were not marathoners, young guys, run 210, well under 215, almost as a training run? Because they had that great base. And not everybody was running 100, but they were running, they'd be running 60 or 80 or 100 on the roads. And they were doing it, the next phase of the base phase is the threshold phase. If you know what intensity you're working with. So because you're doing fairly high mileage at slow intensity, fairly slow intensity, that doesn't mean you can't do some strides. You can work on your technique. You can do other things. We'd even throw in hills and stuff like that occasionally, but you got to know what intensity phase you're in. And then that's the most important thing. If you do too much of something else, you're going to start cheating on, if you're trying to run, say, 80 miles a week, and you introduce interval training and these other things, that's going to distract, because now you're going to be tired, or you're going to go on the track and you don't want to look bad on the track. On the roads, you can individualize it. You can drop to the back of the pack. Ryan Hall, when he was training with the Mammoth, he ran under 60 minutes in half. He'd be the slowest guy he'd be behind the women in the recovery days. Meb would be running fairly fast because he wanted to be efficient. When he runs a little bit faster, he's efficient. Well, physiologists would tell you, you got to be in this zone, you got to be your heart rate. Well, I'm not so sure. But the concept is get that base in. Then the next phase that I always used and really relied on was threshold training. Now, if you did threshold training for couple months, work it in. We were already working it in during the high mileage phase. We were already working in the threshold, but when you get to threshold, then we were more aware of, this is really important right now. And we were doing multiple thresholds, even as far back as community college. Engelbretson has popularized double day of thresholds. We were doing that in the 1960s, and no one could beat us. Guys, that high school team that only won 2 cross-country meets, and they won the county championship that first year, and the next 3 years, nobody beat them. Then I went over to Grossmont. But the same thing happened at Grossmont. There was no state meet in high school. I wish there would have been, but the big invitationals, they could easily beat everybody. They were doing more threshold training. They weren't doing double day threshold, but we're doing more than one threshold per week. And so you're talking to somebody who, preaches threshold. If you read the book, Futterman, who saw the documentary, City Slickers Can't Stay With Me, he saw it, wanted to do a book, not on me, but on how we put all this stuff together, and called it Running to the Edge. Running to the edge is threshold. You go to that edge and hold it.
Yeah.
And Now, he did this and it sold out right away. And he's the sports editor for the New York Times. And it became very popular. And I said, well, you overstated the threshold training because we did other things. And I always thought we were doing balanced training. But when I went to the World Championships 2 years ago in Budapest, on the way home, I said, Martha Watson, my wife, four-time Olympian in long jump and sprints. I said, let's go up to Norway, where always like to go through Norway. My ancestors are from Norway. I said, let's go up and watch Ingebrigtsen train. Well, we missed the opportunity, took a little bit of break after the Worlds. He had popularized double thresholds in a day. And it came from the Norwegian skiers started it. And so it's not true that they're doing double thresholds. Jack Daniels, I think, would argue with that because he's running some 5:20 mile pace on the track. That's not threshold for him. Meb's threshold was when we took it, put her on a treadmill, and you can interpret what the threshold pace should be. He was still at threshold at 4:30s, in the 4:30 per mile. He could run 8 miles. He's rested and at sea level. And at altitude, he would, getting ready for a marathon, he'd run 5 minutes or faster, 4:40 or something like that, for as much as over 10 miles, or we went as far as 15 or even 17. That's threshold training. So that's what we relied on. And these guys were doing this way back, again in the 70s at Grossmont Community College. And they were overwhelmingly better than the people they were competing against. And so I didn't realize at the time what an advantage it was. But now looking back and seeing what these guys, because they were touching on threshold training in the morning, they were touching on threshold training in the evening, not every day, because you need those recovery phases, but that was the bread and butter. Then we could go even into race season, and the guys could usually successfully win races even without high levels of anaerobic or interval training. Maybe we throw in a few 200s and 100s and strides and stuff like that and some hills, but they weren't out there grinding out mile repeats and stuff like that early in the season. So we were delaying. Track season is a long time. So we, in the United States, because it'll start, guys are on the track in February or even earlier than that, they do it indoors. So they got this tremendously long season and they run out of gas at the end of the year. And so we were doing this, we weren't even doing our speed training, and still even 800, but especially a mile and above, they could do really well. And then they would delay interval training until later in the season. And then they would avoid injury. They'd avoid burnout. They would be at their best at the end of the season. We get strong. And it's fun. When you do threshold training, you're learning pace, race pace, close to race pace. You're learning how to maneuver with a bunch of other guys going hard over different terrain. And it's fun. It's what we love doing. I discovered it when I was in college, and do it during the summer, and I'd beat everybody. We'd get into the season, we'd do interval training, I'd get injured, and that would be it. And so I said, no, when I'm coaching, which I did in my own team I was at San Diego State when I graduated in 4 years, and then they made me the assistant coach, and I tried it with our guys, and right away they were successful and made quite a difference. So I've been preaching that for a long time, and when I saw that the Norwegians were doing this, and now you have guys in Northern Arizona and around the world probably pretty much trying to do this thing.
It makes sense. I have a related question, because threshold was something I was going to request you to explain, and you did it very, very well. So I want to be here just for a bit, and would request how to do the threshold training really well. I've seen even at recreational level also it working very well for runners. And so what I understand, that even before you get to threshold, get your aerobic base some mileage in, so that you are at least ready to start getting into threshold, get some strides in, etc., and then get to threshold. Now, if that's the case, how should one look at incorporating threshold in their training on a weekly basis? Should they start with a couple of repeats of threshold? Should it be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes? How much should I do? How do I do? For a layperson, can we please start to just explain it? Will just help.
That's a good question. And Jack Daniels will tell you 20 minutes, but that's not enough for an elite runner. But for a beginner, it's a good place to start. 20 minutes of being at threshold. Threshold is that pace at which, if you go a little bit faster, you're going to go in oxygen debt. You can take, we put people on treadmills to find out exactly what that threshold, what they can do. But on any particular day, it might be slower, it might be faster. So that's the beauty of it, is you're trying to educate the athlete to know what that feels like. One of the ways to do it, you can put them on a track and say, okay, we're going to run 5 miles on the track. So you can watch them, and there's no interruptions, hills or anything. You're going to run 5 miles. We're going to start with 6 minutes, and then we're going to do 5:40. Then we're going to do 5, and you can watch them. If you run yourself like you and me, I can tell when they're running a threshold, and they will figure it out themselves. You want something that you're on that edge where a little bit more, you can talk to somebody, you always hear that as a comparison, but you don't want to. You don't want to talk. There's no conversations going on because you're running hard. Go look at City Slickers Can't Stay With Me. Watch Meb. Sometimes I'm on, I started pacing him on a bicycle. And then I got other guys to do it too at 7,000, 8,000 feet, even higher elevation, and see how hard he's working. That's threshold pace. He's not racing. It confirms it because we put him on a treadmill, and also we took lactate tests to make sure, and he wears sometimes a monitor, but he doesn't need all of that. I could tell it with almost any athlete. And in fact, several years ago, because I was worried about that, even at Grossmont, guys were running well below 5-minute miles on a threshold run, but they were progressive runs. So we start easy. I'd run with them so they wouldn't go out too fast. They wouldn't know where they're going, so they had to stay with me. They couldn't leave me. And then at one point, I'd say, okay, we're doing this loop. I'd move over on the other side when they came around. They were usually 8-mile runs, but it got faster and faster and faster. So the best runners in the front would be, and these are teenagers, they're running under 5 and sometimes quite a bit under 5. My explanation to them was this, that threshold is something you're working hard, but you're not racing. Sometimes, you're racing, but I said, if you're staying up the night before to get ready for this, you ain't going to make it to the end of the season. No, you're not going to psych up for this thing. You're coming out and you're going to run hard on that day, what you have. And then I wouldn't get out after guys that are way back. I wouldn't say anything to them. Just after months or sometimes a year, all of a sudden they're in that front group. But so it's a very natural thing. So this research I saw years ago, because I was thinking, should we be doing more lactate tests? Should we do, to find out exactly what that pace should be? They said when they tested athletes who had some experience as runners, they were all right on threshold pace when they were doing threshold pace. It was a feeling, it's a natural pace. That's what I loved when I, discovered it myself. This is what we should be doing. And so I hope that answers that a little bit. But again, you're talking about a build-up phase, aerobic. That's the intensity for that period of time, whatever period you have. Then you're concentrating more on some of these threshold runs. And until we put together the group at Mammoth, usually our threshold runs were just progressive runs. Start slow, build. So you go on threshold. And often we did that twice a day. It wasn't so organized. It was just, this is what people like to do. And sure, and I'd coach them or caution them or say, okay, we're going fairly strong today, or hey, we got a big race, and or we want to be careful because we got an even stronger workout coming here. So, take it easy today. But other than that, you let them run when they feel like they're ready to go. And so that, I hope that that's helpful in setting it up. So it's very easy.
It is, and it's a great explanation that you're working hard, but you're not racing. That's a very good way to put it. But I have a follow-up question on it. That is, let's assume I'm able to run 30 minutes at threshold pace once a week. Is that sufficient for me to be there for several weeks in a row? At what stage do I start to think? I'm just trying to get some guidelines for people who are listening to this and may not have access to someone like you for that matter. And they still want to do better. Maybe someone wants to break a 3:30 in a marathon or a 3 hours in a marathon. At what stage do they move from one threshold to two a week, or can they do multiple sets of threshold? Will that be right? Are there any general guidelines that will be helpful? I do want to recommend your documentary, City Slickers Can't Stay With Me. The only thing is it's on Prime, but it's not available in India. And it's such an embarrassment that we are not able to watch it.
Yeah. Well, they could get the book too, I guess. Again, I don't have a financial interest in it, but the people that did this, Robert Lucipanian, was a runner in our program at Grossman, Humboldt Toads, et cetera, and he did the documentary. And then, as I said, Matt Futterman, I think it's a double-day book. It would be on Amazon too, but people might want to read it because it kind of helps you understand what we were doing, and emphasizing, how important that phase of our training was and how much we relied on it. But to answer your question, how often to do threshold training, I think with Meb, and because we would do a full warm up, and then at over 7,000 feet elevation, let's say, which we did much of our training, from the start, he'd be running maybe 5-minute mile pace at that altitude. And he would be going for anywhere from 6 to 15 miles or more. So that's one level of this thing. That would be enough maybe for the whole week. He would get other occasions when he got to threshold, but it would be briefly, and it would not be anytime you put it on your schedule, there's an expectation there. There's a commitment to it. And if you can't do it, there's a loss of confidence.
Correct.
And a little bit of fear going into the workouts when you can't do that. So I left a lot of this so open-ended. That's how the workout was individualized. And Meb actually came up, he was doing what Joan Benoit and some of our other runners were doing late in his career. Remember when he won Boston? He won New York in 2009. He won Boston the year after the bombing. That was 2014. He was old. He was 40, I think, or 39 or something. One of the reasons they let him go was they thought, he was past his prime at Boston. But the workouts he was doing then were a 9-day, and he came up with this, but other people had done similar, but it was a 9-day rotation. So he would do, in each 3-day section, he would put in one long run, one interval training session, and one threshold training session. And then he would rotate him between those 9 days. So if it was scheduled that he was going to do a threshold, but he didn't feel like it, or the weather was bad, he could do something else, the intervals or something like that, or the long run. So the intense days were just those 3. We found out after, there's a long explanation, but hopefully it has some value. I know it's going to be hard to follow all this stuff, but people, I hope, will get something that'll trigger thoughts on, you got to be even if you have a coach, you want to work with that coach to make sure that this is enjoyable and working for you, and that's got to be a partnership in figuring out what that workout should be. And some days you should work with some other teammates, and other days you maybe should go by yourself or with other teammates. So, but what I was referring to is with Meb, especially after 2004, when he won or got second in Athens in the marathon, that very hot, humid, hilly course. They came home, took a couple of weeks off, and I had proposed they just do one interval per day or per week, one threshold per week, one long run per week. Previous to that, he had been doing 2 intervals a week and the other sides. And I felt that might be too much, especially trying to be ready for New York in 90 days. So I said, Deena kept going on her, that same pattern. She dropped out of the marathon at 16 miles in New York. Meb almost won it. Hendrick from all beat him, but it was close. And he had recovered that much and was doing so well. He never went back to more than one interval training speed session per week. Never did. And I had suggested that he try it every other week, do double intervals after Athens when he got going again, but he never went back to that. And he got better and better. So I hope there's a nugget there. If and Deena went to that too eventually. In fact, all our runners at Mammoth, and I think most people are doing that now. They're not doing the old double intervals per week. And so that allows, what it allowed too, is for another threshold session. So he would get one major one in. Again, this was an organized, like, okay, we're doing 10 miles today, threshold at about a 5-minute mile pace. And off you go, and again at altitude. And then the other one would be.
Will you? Okay, sorry, just one, Coach. Just one question. You said when you are doing 10 miles at threshold pace, will you split it into 2, or will you do 10 miles in one go?
One shot. Yeah.
Okay.
10 miles. Okay. And but on that second threshold day during that 1 week, we would start out. Maybe he's going to run, because again, he's training for the marathon then. So you got to factor this in. So he's running maybe 6 to 8 miles at a fairly easy pace. Okay. Then he picks it up, maybe does the last 4, 5, 6 miles at threshold pace. So he gets threshold again versus back in the 70s with those guys at Grossmont, early days of UCLA, they're doing this quite a bit, where they're running a few easy miles and then they're going hard back. The Kenyans started doing this way back when they didn't have many distance runners at all. And that was very simple. Just they ran out very slow in the morning, came back really hard. And a lot of times they did that twice a day. That's threshold twice a day.
Wow. So I took so many points, and I'm going to include some of it in my training, and for sure. So I was saying I took several points here. The base build, then the threshold. Threshold could change depending on your training age during and the season, your maturity of how much can you take, and then you get to interval potentially. I've seen my personal experience that intervals are pretty taxing on the joints. It takes way longer to recover. You don't feel the best at night. At times you wake up thinking you just not recovered at all. It's quite fatiguing, and so it seems like you have to spray this workout sparingly and not as often. And threshold, even in training, is just actually a lot of fun to experience threshold once you understand it. You're breathing a little hard but feeling a little good. You're sweating but you're fine. You're not out of control. Your body is in your control, and you are in that zone that you can just glide in and continue, isn't it?
I couldn't have said it better. no, that's what I discovered by experimenting myself, and that's what I try to teach exactly that way. I mean, you've stated better than I have ever stated, I think, but quite a few advantages, and you mentioned them, but just I jotted down a couple things because with threshold, well, I mentioned less injuries. I had stress fractures when I started doing the intervals every year. But when I stopped doing that and doing the threshold, and it was the same for a lot of the guys I've trained over the years, and you control the opportunity to be better at the end of the season because you're not breaking down psychologically and physically, which you expressed. I think all of that is, I think you've touched everything that I've preached for for a long time, and Futterman caught all that, and I thought he exaggerated it, but I apologized when I realized that now everybody was trying to do that same thing, and we were doing it much more, I shouldn't say lackadaisical, but not as rigid as what they're doing now. And this might be probably better because look at what they're running. So, you'd have to go and figure out what they're looking for as far as heart rates and all that. And I started out coaching using heart rates and thinking that because I love my science classes, and I thought, there's got to be an answer. I didn't want guys doing 10 times 400 meters if they get the same results with 8 times 400 meters. You're trying to do the least amount of work as possible to get the full potential of that athlete, and each athlete's different, and from season to season it changes. So, but that's got to be in the back of your mind, I think. Otherwise, you're going to wear them down or get them injured. So you're trying to be efficient in your training. Well, threshold turns out, if it's controlled, I think to a certain degree, it's the most efficient way to train. Because threshold, you can increase your threshold, basic threshold, easier than you can your VO2 max. And a lot of people I don't think that ever has occurred to them. If your threshold is high enough that you're running 3 laps, even at 1,500 meters or a mile, and the guy next to you is at the edge already at 2 laps, who's going to win that race? Now. And if you don't have a lot of speed like Meb, you got to get away from him on the 3rd lap. Maybe you got to go on the 1st lap to get rid of him. But you see what I'm saying? Well, if you got threshold, I went to coaches' clinics where the coach was talking about his athletes for cross-country season. Let's say they were running 4 miles in a big invitational. Here in California, we have invitationals that'll include the community colleges, the universities, all the collegiate athletes, and they're big deals. And, you can compare. How does your workouts compare and your athletes compare to, this is before I went to UCLA, community college. And I'd hear somebody saying they were doing 6 times or 5 times a mile and with a certain rest, and that's how fast they're running already at the beginning of the season, cross country in the fall. And I thought to myself, there's no way my guys can do that workout. And yet a week later, when the invitational 4 miles was run, we won easily. And so I realized, but we were, I asked, I'll give you another example. James Lee worked with Legat. He was Legat's coach at Washington State and later at Arizona. When he used to call me once in a while, Coach, we're doing, not just with James, but his team, say, they're doing these 10 times 400 in this time with this rest, but they can't run a mile in this time. And I would ask him, especially with Legat, I said, and he mentions this in clinics sometimes when I'm there and he's speaking, said, I would say, well, what could he run? How far did he go in his threshold and how fast? And James didn't have an answer. So in the clinic, he said, well, let's give an example. Steve Scott miler, middle distance runner, 10 miles, 5-minute mile pace. That was a standard workout. Threshold training. He was doing that all the time. And so when James Lee got doing that, he beat Meb in the conference cross country, 5-mile race. Meb got him the next 2 races at the end of the season, 10,000 meters, but it makes all the difference. And I hope James Lee wouldn't regret that I'm saying this, but he said it himself in front of other coaches. So, and I've had high school coaches that went through our program. They're doing the same thing. They're saying these guys run so fast on the track. They're great, but they're not winning the championship. And my question was, remember how we went out on the roads and you guys are going X amount of miles? You're doing it a lot of times twice a day, and we do that for long periods of time. Yeah. I said, well, why don't you try it? Call back, and they've been doing this for a couple of years, beating people, but never winning the championship. And they call back, we won the championship. That was the difference. Now, your guys many of the people you're talking about that are, 27, they already know this stuff. But maybe what they would get out of this was do maybe even a little bit more of it. Don't shy away from it. If it feels good, have fun doing it. If you avoid injuries, why not? Because we had a heck of a lot of success. There's more sophisticated training now than there was, when I was working with Meb and before, and I would probably incorporate other things better than I did then. But I would still, the heart of it would be that threshold training. And because it's popular throughout the world right now,
Awesome.
I take some pride in, not that it was me that promoted it, but I'm glad that it kind of shows that we were ahead of our time in that area a little bit, and why it works so well.
It's a great advocacy to threshold that it deserves. And towards the end, I have a question for runners like us, who are a lot more, who listen to us, who are full-time, either corporate executives doing their own works, but at the same time, they have their own endurance, their own fitness-related goals as well. Some have to run the 7 world major marathons, some have to do better in the half marathon, etc. And we've seen most of us are able to go up until 50 miles a week and be okay with it. Now, my question to you, Coach, is if I'm able to run 50 miles a week and I want to do better in marathon in terms of improving time, and if I were to look at incorporating the aerobic training, that's easy run, threshold, intervals, and long run, how do I include and periodize this if I were to look at a 24 weeks block, for example? Very hard for a coach.
To be fair, I'd have to write this down and call you back, but I'll make a stab at it. But it's please don't rely on it. It's off the top of my head. But it's a good question, and that's the way you should look at what you have and where you're going to spend your time. For me, on a 24 week, 4 times, I think that whenever you're limited on time, so that's 4 months.
6 months.
That's enough time to spend on each segment, on each intensity segment, enough time to really get close to maybe maximum on each one of those. If you're talking aerobic, strength training, and then threshold, then the next phase would be the generally spreading out the faster stuff, which I call interval training. If you're talking about yourself, you're running 50 miles a week?
Yeah. Okay.
Person is probably as good a shape as you. You can probably run 50 miles even if haven't been training. Right?
Yeah.
Is it easy?
It's I can't take more than that. It just seems just that. Yeah, because I just don't have time.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you're limited to 50 miles
by
a
time.
week.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think I would take as much as 6 weeks that I'd be working on the base at least.
Okay.
And on the threshold, I'd be starting to introduce it somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks. I'd be picking up the pace at some point. During it wouldn't be a separate threshold, but it'd be like ending up your last couple of miles at threshold pace, trying to get used to pushing it a little bit. Same time at the end of, after 4 to 6 weeks, put some strides in at the end of your workouts. Not all of them, but a couple times a week, 2-3 times a week, do 100-meter strides so you get the turnover. Work on your mechanics, stride mechanics. Yeah. So that'd be your base. I'd keep your mileage at least 50 miles. You're going to be doing 50 miles, I think, the whole time. Because that's not a whole lot. What are you going to try to run? What distance?
This marathon.
Oh, the marathon. Okay, you're going to be doing 50 miles the whole time. See, some guys now, which brings up a point. I'm glad you asked these questions, because some guys do this. They put all this threshold training in, even if it's just once a week, but they're doing, 5 mile or longer threshold training. Towards the end of the week, or towards the end of the season, getting ready for the championship, they stop doing it. And they stop running that one long run a week. They're detraining a little bit. Now on the track, they're running 400s and 200s, but that ain't going to win the race unless you're running a 4 times 400 race or 4 times, and you get a rest in between. You're really getting good at that, but you've given up some of your strength and conditioning. So I throw that in because you're only running 50 miles a week. You're going to do that all the way through, or whenever you can get up to 50 miles, and then you just continue that. So you're inserting the threshold probably after 4 to 6 weeks, and then you're mixing in intervals, not more than once a week, and the threshold and a long run. But can you go long do you have time to go more than 50 miles, or to go, what's your longest run going to be?
Longest run will be 32, 34 kilometers. And
you have time to do that once a week?
Yeah.
All right. That's pretty good training. What kind of time are you going to go for? What do you think you can run?
So I'm not only talking about myself, but also a few who are representative of me, who are in similar area, and we have target of sub 3 to get to in a marathon. And so if that's how we need to achieve, how do we go about it?
I did a sub 3 when I was a little over 40. Just working out with the guys, no interval training, no threshold training, just put the miles in, and I was able to go a little under 3 on a kind of a tough course. So I know what it feels like. I wanted to feel that, what I was doing with the runners. I think just consistency, I don't know what kind of ability you have and how efficient you are as a runner, but what's your age now?
I'm now 40.
Same age as I was when I ran, sub 3, so I can identify with you perfect. All I did was make sure that 1 day a week I got a really good long run in. It'd be on Sunday with the athletes. I was down in San Diego. We run from inland down to the beach. My wife would pick us up, and I'd do a hard 15, and that's all. The rest of the week, I was just doing warm-ups and cool-downs with the athletes for the most part. But a lot of their warm-ups and cool-downs were 3 miles each. So sometimes I was getting 6 miles and just doing that. Right. I did no intervals. I didn't do any real true threshold. Although when I was running out to the beach on Sundays, that was almost threshold for me. But that gives you my personal experience with it. I'm best when I'm watching somebody, even if it's not every day. And because you can tell me you're running a 5-minute mile or a 6-minute mile, but what do you look like when you're running it? What's the effort? I don't even need the heart rate or anything like that, but I need to see the effort, because I said, nope, that's a little bit too fast for you, or no, you're going too slow, or you need to work on your mechanics a little bit. That'd be how I would do it. So trying to do it without seeing you and being more precise than just generally, I would keep all the way through that whole period of time, or as soon as you can get up to the 50 miles, I do that definitely. And then just mix the threshold in when you feel like it's getting easy to run your mileage weekly, that you feel comfortable doing it. I'd start finishing up your runs couple times a week with threshold. When you get a little bit further in, I don't know how many weeks it's going to take. I'd have to look at you and see, but I'm estimating 6 weeks or longer. Then you're going to start the interval or the threshold earlier and make it a threshold workout. If that makes sense, And I'd suggest, especially if you're running, well, even with guys, just do a progressive run. And you probably work every day, you sit a lot. It takes a while to get warmed up. So even if you warm up, you're not ready to hit threshold out the door. Just start slow and then build, and then try to hold it. And the distance can be varied from time to time, but I try to get in a couple sessions, at least once a week, even right up close to race time. But much of that time, I would get in 2 of those. And your interval training, I think you should do, which I didn't do, but mile repeats or anything from even quarters are good. 400 or up to a mile. I don't see any reason for you to go further than a mile repeat, but you could do 4 or 5 mile repeats with a fairly short rest in between. You do that once a week or every other week, but I think that'll help you a lot too. And then when you start doing that, that's going to make the threshold pace easier. And you're going to be more efficient. When you run a little bit faster, it forces you to be a little more efficient. And that'd be a fun project, I hope.
Yeah.
Running a marathon or anything changes our lives to a certain degree, because we've got a goal that it's difficult and it gets our attention. And, and that's a wonderful thing in life, that even when you don't want to get up and do it, you feel so good when you get it done. And a marathon is just wonderful in that way. Well, any distance race, I have great respect for anybody that runs any distance, even if they only go out and run on the weekends. For me, it's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, no, commitment to just being outdoor, being fit, getting some time to yourself in addition to working all the time. I think it's just a great thing. And here in India as well, we are trying to promote movement through which, even if people are able to walk and run, 1 minute walk, half a minute run, that still is okay. So long as you are out of the door for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, that's what matters. And this was one of the reasons we started this company. And so we do cover a wide spectrum, starting from absolute beginners to absolute best in the world like you, to have the pleasure of speaking and learning from the experiences. It has been, I think, what I would request, because the conversation has gone so great. If you have time in the coming weeks, I would like to get another time with you to have maybe a even more detailed conversation whenever time permits, because there's so much more that's left to discuss, I think. But today's conversation, the way it has gone, I feel a great emphasis on threshold and keeping the conversation around 1 hour, because that's what we keep, around 50 minutes to an hour, so that people are able to grasp it, come back with questions, and if there are questions, then we reach out with a request to guess again. I think that will add a great value.
Thanks for letting me spout these ideas. I really enjoyed it, as I said, and look forward to another time.